Hey everyone, it is Alex again, and I am back with my fourth build of the Sanctum League. I know it has been a few weeks. I played this character for about 2 weeks, and then I took a nice little break, played some other things. Some EVE Online tournaments are starting up, and I was getting into that. Anyway, so I am introducing my Frenzy Charge stacking crit bleed Raider for the Sanctum League. I was very excited to make this character. It is weird, and everyone says bleed is terrible, so I decided to give it a shot in a very non-traditional way. And I think I was at least moderately successful. This build is not going to be breaking the meta, there's nothing like that, but I think some things are interesting here, and if someone wants to do something with these mechanics, there might be something there. I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. I decided to go reasonably hard into its tankiness. You might see my health bouncing around, but this is actually a very, very rippy map, and as well as I'm taking alters, so the fact that I don't die in this map is actually pretty impressive. I was fairly happy with it. Anyway, so what you're seeing on the screen, I've been doing Red, Influence, and Legion, just like my last character. I didn't bother respecking my Atlas tree. We're using Flicker Strike for clear and bladestorm for single target. As you can see, the single target is fairly reasonable, and I'm pretty happy with the clear. Some rare monsters will definitely live a lot longer than the random chaff all over the place, but the Flicker can handle most of them. Occasionally, rares with extra life and fizz mitigation or the cycling damage reduction will take a while to kill, and I'll switch over to bladestorm for those. But all in all, Flicker Strike has been doing a very nice job, especially after I got a lot of my tank layers into the build. So, why Frenzy Charge, why crit, why Raider? What am I doing here? So, Raider, because I wanted to do Frenzy Charges and crits, that's pretty much it. The crit is actually coming from a Deadeye node that I got using Forbidden Jewels, and that is Rupturing. So what Rupturing does is essentially when you crit with a bleeding attack, it gives up to 3 stacks of 25% faster bleeds. However, this faster, while working the same as normal, faster for dot damage, it is multiplicative with the normal fasters. So, you might with a mastery get 15% faster bleeds and then have 3 ruptures for 75. That isn't adding up to 90% faster. It's actually adding up to 1.15 faster and then times 1.75. So whatever that math comes out to, it is multiplicative with faster mechanics. And so you end up with very short, very high damage bleeds as long as you are critting the enemy sometimes. Rupture stacks last 4 seconds, so it's not individual to the bleeds. The enemy itself is ruptured, it's a debuff. And so you only need to crit 3 times in 4 seconds, which is not that hard to do with something like Bladestorm. So I only have something like a 15 or 20% crit chance. I thought about going full on crit with bleeds, but the scaling was simply not there, as I think most people are aware, even for poisons and stuff like that. Crit ailments are simply not all that good. So we only went for a moderate amount of crit chance to get the rupture proccing relatively consistently on single targets. Frenzy charges. So that is actually coming from a helmet. We are running a helmet called Usurper's Penance. This unique helmet I have never seen anyone else use before, but it has some interesting frenzy charge stacking for bleeds. It gives you 4% faster and 4% faster bleeds per frenzy charge and 4% increased fizz dot multi per frenzy charge. And so with this build having 8 frenzy charges, we are looking at a fairly sexy 32% increased dot multi and 32% faster bleeds. Again, very short bleeds with the rupture mechanic on top of that. So these are the 2 mechanics I went for and why I went for Raider, trying to go away from the very, very common Gladiator bleed builds. And I have found the build to actually be very satisfying. The perk of going Frenzy Charge stacking in Raider is getting to use Flicker Strike again, which it has been a while since I have done that. This footage here of the 4-way Shaper Guardians, this is actually white. I hadn't done this one yet, so I went ahead and did it white because I wanted to make sure I could do it. And as far as my actual bossing tanking, it is good, but I don't know if it's good enough to be doing rippy yellow 4-way invitations. As you'll actually see later in the footage, I can die quite a bit to those because I did try it. So yeah, the single target is feeling pretty solid. I'm face taking most of the mechanics here, as you can see. It's a nice build. I'm fairly happy with it. Um, as far as our defensive properties of the build, we're running, of course, spell suppression cap. We are running 100% ailment avoidance. We've got determination, hitting something like 30k armor, and then we are around 90% chance to evade. Using and utilizing a very interesting mechanic I like to use whenever I'm on the right side of the tree and going evasion based, and that is blind scaling. So something that a lot of people have thrown to the curb is blind after they nerfed it from being a half chance to get hit and have it instead changed it to be 20% less evasion rating and 20% less accuracy rating. And this is less, so it happens all after all rare modifiers or map modifiers or anything like that. So when I say scaling, if you take the 2 blind wheels on the tree and a mastery, I believe you end up somewhere around 130% more effect of blind. And so you're going to end up at 46% less accuracy rating and 46% less evasion rating on all enemies that you're blinding. And utilizing Sand Stance with Flesh and Stone, we're blinding everything within a pretty decent AoE of ourselves, which is what I use for clear. And then we have some blind on hit with the note on the tree for when we're trying to boss with blood stance. So the bosses are also blinded. What this does, that 46% less accuracy and less evasion rating, is it makes evasion capping, or at least getting a lot of evasion chance, and accuracy capping significantly easier. I believe we are looking at somewhere around 1500 accuracy rating, and POB tells me that it's 100% chance to hit. And we are also looking at somewhere around 20,000 evasion rating with flasks up. And against pinnacle bosses, that puts us at about a 90% chance to evade, with the raiders 10% more chance to evade. So blind is allowing us to get these very, very solid stats out of relatively few resources, that being low evasion and low accuracy. This means I don't need to run Grace to get this level of evasion rating, because we are frenzy charge stacking, we get a shitload of increased evasion rating. We're not running Grace. And that let me run determination to get our 40k armor. I don't quite remember. And then of course like I said, spell suppression, Raider helps a lot with that. And then the ailment avoidance, I'm not actually running the Raider node for ailment avoidance because I wanted the frenzy charge node and both onslaught nodes. So we are instead getting all of that from the boots and the life wheel between Ranger and Duelist. And then I am anointing Crystal Skin for another 20%. I'll show that on the gear when I get to it. But that gets us a 100% chance to avoid elemental ailments, which actually helped with the survivability of the build a lot. So, as you see, we've been going through a bunch of boss running. A lot of these bosses I hadn't actually done yet this league. I'm usually fairly timid on bossing, and I don't do them for a long time until I have a very strong character and it's getting late in the league. And I decided this was the character, given how much time I had put into it, I would go ahead and do a lot of these bosses. So yeah, we've got Cyrus here. This is not Uber by any means. This is definitely not an Uber bosser. We only have about 5 million DPS against Pinnacles, and the tank is definitely not magical or anything like that. So just regular bosses, but for these regular bosses and going through the in-game like this, it has been pretty nice and solid for that. As you can see, the DPS is effective enough, and I don't believe I die doing this Cyrus, which is actually kind of rare. Cyrus is pretty rough a lot of the time. So after playing this build for a couple weeks, we ended up level 94. It's not the best. I did die a decent amount doing mapping, and definitely once I started doing this boss running, I did all of these back to back, so as you can see, my XP is eh. I did struggle to do leveling up once I hit about level 93, and that's just because of Flicker Strike. Flicker Strike, without being an absolute immortal god, is just gonna be hard to level up. I was really close to doing 5 ways or something like that with a group to level up. I wanted to hit probably 96-ish, because honestly, with those levels, I probably would have gone either crit damage reduction or just more life, actually. Hitting something like 5k life against single targets would have been very, very nice. We changed our gloves for single target, which gives us a bit more life than you'll see in the mapping showcases where we run hemophilia. If you're asking where we're getting the vulnerability on hit, that's actually coming from a glove corrupt. We're not running that on ring. And yeah, so if you want to get XP on this build, probably just don't do Flicker Strike. Flicker Strike is not necessary. You could probably clear just with Bladestorm. But I found Flicker Strike to be rather entertaining. Running the Ancestral Call, the Melee Splash, all that kind of stuff. It does start to feel pretty nice. Here you'll see Lycia. This is actually the first time I did the second phase of Lycia. I usually have a Divine or two on the line when I get to this boss, and I tend to just take the stairs. I'll skip going beyond to phase number 2 because I'm scared of losing my Divines, and I'm not usually very confident with my builds when I get to this point because, you know, I'm poor and I want that currency. But I didn't have anything too valuable on the line here, so I decided to give it a go. It was a pretty good Sanctum run, and I was pretty confident in the build actually for this boss. And I was ready for the bullet hell phase this time, unlike last time when I did it on my Marauder starter. So this fight goes pretty damn smoothly. This mechanic's not too bad when you have this much move speed. And yeah, it felt pretty good. I was fairly happy with the fight, and the build overall has been nice for bossing actually, compared to a lot of the builds I end up making. And Flicker Strike, of course, is carrying the map clearing to a pretty nice level. All in all, I think the budget for this build has ended up around 30 divines or so. It has been solid, but definitely not a super budget build. Alright, let's get into the build in game. So this is my level 94 Rupturing Storm Raider. So again, the core mechanics of what we're doing, we are running Frenzy Charge stacking with Usurper's Penance. So this is the helmet I was talking about. 4% damage over time multi for bleeding per Frenzy Charge, and bleeding you inflict deals damage 4% faster per Frenzy Charge. And we also get a bit of Frenzy Charge generation, but Raider is mostly covering that for us. So this is a nice little helmet for damage. I actually did a enchant service for this helmet. I was really tight on reservation efficiency and all that kind of stuff, so I went ahead, bought a bunch of these helmets, ran corruptions, and then got an enchant service to get myself the Herald of Purity mana reservation efficiency. You can also do flesh and stone, and you'll get a similar amount. Oh, you get the same amount of reservation. You just have to make sure that the one you don't have enchanted is not in the helmet, as far as that 90% cost and reservation multiplier. I'm also running a level 3 Enlighten to be able to fit all this. They're fitting Flesh and Stone, Pride, Determination, Herald of Purity, and War Banner into the build. So then the second part is crit with the Forbidden Flame and Forbidden Flesh for Rupturing, which is a Deadeye node, which gives critical strikes which inflict bleeding, also inflict Rupture, which is essentially 25% faster bleeds times 3, so you get 75% faster, but that is multiplicative with all other faster effects, like what I get on this helmet. So you end up with very short, very high damage bleeds. And we're getting our crit chance, I think, mostly from this Suppression Mastery, Bottled Faith, and the Blind Wheel right here gives us a bit. We don't need a whole lot of crit chance because we only need to inflict 3 ruptures every 4 seconds or so, which is not hard to do with a skill like bladestorm and how fast we attack. We have no Frenzy Charges at the moment, so it's a little slow. So yeah, Frenzy Charge, stacking, and all that. The weapon we're running is a two-handed axe. This one I bought, I believe, non-6 linked for about 2 divines or so. It's a nice base. It's got the chance to cause bleeding, which we actually desperately need. And then just a bunch of fizz DPS. It's good enough. You can do a little bit better with actually a non-sundering axe and just get higher fizz damage on it. Especially, it'll also get wider ranges of your damage as well. And so you're going to end up with better ramping, a worse low end, but better ramping. And it might be ultimately better damage with a better base than this, but this base is pretty damn solid, and I managed to find this for about 2 div non-6 linked, and I 6 linked it myself. I actually do desperately need that fire res as well, so that was very nice. As far as our amulet, we are running just a nice life resist damage over time multi, and then I crafted non-channeling skills. I bought this amulet for I think a few divines, and just crafted on it. It was nothing too crazy there. The ring we're running, I just bought this at some point pretty late on in the character. I just needed life, a little bit of resists, and some accuracy rating, so I decided what I would run with is actually just see if I could find anything good enough out there with this Warlord mod on there for the bleeding damage and duration, which is actually a very powerful mod. And sure enough, I found this out there. It's good enough. That is a nice node for our single target, and so I was pretty happy with it. We're running a Herald of Purity ring, as well as Circle of Guilt for the buff effect and fizz damage while affected by Herald of Purity. This gives us a lot of damage, as well as we do need the attributes. And then those implicits are actually very nice, particularly the evasion rating per frenzy charge. We run 8 frenzy charges, and so that is a nice 48% increased evasion rating, which is non-zero because we do actually need every bit of evasion rating we can get. The chest plate, I crafted this myself. I was just doing Reforge, I think, caster on this Zodiac leather base, and I just hit additional curse, empty prefixes otherwise, and 3 T1 resists. Kind of insane. I don't know if it's worth meta crafting. Like, suffixes cannot be changed, Reforge prefix, suffixes cannot be changed, Reforge with caster. To try and get better prefixes, but honestly, I was pretty happy as is. I don't have that kind of currency to go metacrafting like that. And to be honest, I think it's only worth doing keep suffixes if you have like double influence, double elevated influence, you do some Awakened Orb stuff. So I didn't think that was worth it for the triple T1 res, but this did make building my character quite a bit easier because I had all these resists going on. This is honestly just dumb luck. Something like this is rather expensive to get. If you don't get resists this good, you're just going to have a ring without this Warlord mod, and you just get another resist suffix or something like that. It's not going to be too worse for the build, all in all. Boots, this is something I crafted fairly late into the build. We are running 60% ailment avoidance on these boots. We need 60% to get 100% reduction. And we then did some Aisling stuff with suffixes cannot be changed and a Veiled Chaos Orb to get the move speed. And then I crafted life, and I believe I slammed the increased armor evasion rating with an Exalt Orb. So that's what we're running there. The ailment avoidance, I believe, is the 4th tier. So in order to get that, you're going to need to probably, at the most currency efficient way to do it, is to craft with the tier 3 currency, get yourself the Avoid Elemental Ailments, use 1 tier 4 of the Searing Exarchs, and then use an Orb of Conflict. And that'll give you a greater than 50-50 chance that you will up the Ailment Avoid to the tier 4 and lower the Searing Exarch mod down to tier 3. Once it's tier 4, you roll whatever Searing Exarch you want until you get what you want. I was going to be happy with either action speed or chaos res. We ended up with action speed, so that's what I have. Belt, we are running Resaltha's Coil. It's a mediocre Resaltha's Coil. I put the Catalyst on there myself. This just gives us more of that ramp I was talking about. Our average bleed is somewhere around 5 million, but if we sit there and ramp and stack bleeds, because it will only damage with the higher damage bleeds, we sit there and stack bleeds, we will end up with that very large damage range from Resaltha's Coil and this big Sundering Axe. Our maximum damage is something like 1,000, and our minimum is like 150. So as we stack our really fast attack speed, we'll actually ramp better and better bleeds onto the single target. And so that's the point behind this belt. There might be better options out there, but this is what I went with. Gloves, for clear, I am running a double corrupted hemophilia. This is actually very expensive. I went for it because I wanted it. That's pretty much it. You could absolutely skip the +1 maximum frenzy and simply go vulnerability. That'll save you a few divines. But on the market, the vulnerability on hit was 5 divines, and this double corrupted one was 8. So I figured it was worth the extra few divines just to get a really nice double corrupt for this build, so I went ahead and did it. As far as for single target, we're going to be running these Ferul's Pounce. Again, with the Frenzy Charge, we no longer need the vulnerability on hit because we're simply going to self-cast it. And then we get some accuracy rating, more life, and then we get that increased damage with hits. We're already running Crimson Dance, so the other effects from this don't matter because we also aren't running Cat Stealth. This is just for the increased damage, life, and accuracy rating, and the Frenzy Charge. This is the cheapest way to get all those stats going, and so, it's just a nice pair of gloves for that single target. far as flasks, I'm running a Bottled Faith, Chaos Resist with reduced effective curses, evasion rating, armor with increased evasion rating and armor. They just happen to be mixed matched. And then a life flask with bleed and CB immunity. That's what we're running for the gear. Our anoint is Crystal Skin, again for that 100% chance to avoid elemental ailments with this and the boots. Gyms. So, the gyms we are running, Flicker Strike is our clear. I'm running Divergent for the increased teleport range. No. Awaken Swift Affliction, Divergent Melee Splash. This gives way more splash damage than even Awakened. Awakened has more AoE, but Divergent has more damage, and I went with the more damage. Multi-Strike, Awakened Ancestral Call. This is very cheap. And then Life Tap because we have no mana. Mana became a really big issue with Flicker Strike in particular. It's a very expensive ability. Our single target setup is bladestorm. I don't even have quality on this. The skill effect duration doesn't really matter. There is an alt quality for more damage with the blood bladestorms, but they already do half damage, and so I didn't really think it was worth it. We're running Unbound Ailments. This would be Awakened if I kept investing into the build. Awakened with quality is actually a very, very large single target damage boost with much longer bleeds, allowing for higher ramps and way more damage. So that's a big upgrade. You got Awakened here with 20 quality. Awakened Melee Fizz for the Intimidate. Multi-Strike, Awakened Brutality for the Crush. And then this could also be Awakened to Deadly Ailments for, again, more damage. We're missing the quality on these because I was planning to upgrade them, never got around to it. The helmet setup I've already kind of shown you. I went Enlightened, Determination, Pride, and Flesh and Stone with all the reservation efficiency on the Corruption. We went Anomalous here for the increased evasion rating and armor. It was just there. It's not a huge deal. It was pretty cheap. War Banner, Herald of Purity, Leap Slam, and Self-Cast Vulnerability. I'm then running Mark on Hit, Poacher's Mark. Poacher's Mark for the mana gain on hit, the reduction in Fizz mitigation, and a bit of extra Fizz damage. And then Steel Skin, and both of these are on life tap because otherwise I wouldn't be able to cast them. So yeah, that covers our gym setup. And now I'm going to go ahead and go onto the tree. So, we are a Raider. I took the Frenzy Charge node for the extra max Frenzy Charge and easy generation. I took this for the spell suppression, and then we went double Onslaught Wheel for the chance to evade enemy attacks during Onslaught. This is very, very nice, makes evasion capping much easier. So on here, you'll see that my evasion rating is very, very bad. This is not taking into account all the blind stacking I'm doing. So you got to keep that in mind for the build. Apparently my armor is actually much lower than I was telling you guys. It's only about 20k. We are running a Watcher's Eye with additional Fizz mitigation from Determination, and then physical damage using Pride. This helps with the explosions, that's why I went with this. It makes the Hemophilia explosions even stronger, as well as it helps our bleeds. So then we come up here, we get our reservation efficiency, some health. The main blind wheel that we're running, we get increased evasion rating and a bunch of blind effect, and the mastery for blind effect, on top of this wheel here for blind on hit, crit chance, and more blind effect. With that blind effect on an enemy in Sand Stance, or I trigger it with this on hit, that evade chance jumps up to about 90% on POB. We come up here for the Frenzy Charge and Life. We've got Spell Suppression here with the crit chance, another Jewel for Forbidden Flame, Frenzy Charge, Life, Spell Suppression, Life, some dot damage, Frenzy Charge, the other Forbidden Flesh, Frenzy Charge stacking, Life Wheel with our increased life. We come up here for Crimson Dance, Bleed. Bleed duration is by far the best mastery here. This bleed duration is very important. Another Aura Wheel, Life. Come up here for the Axe Nodes, bunch of life, and the Bleed Wheel. And then a nice little rare Jewel for some damage and life. And so that's pretty much all we're running for the tree. What I would do with another few levels, because we're only level 94, is honestly probably just some of these 6% increased life nodes. It's very, very helpful for the build, and I think it would make the build a lot nicer to have something like 4,600 while clearing and about 5k during single target. Really helps with those one-shots, and is very, very useful. So that's probably what I would actually do with the next few levels. Other options could be to take this wheel and swap to Molten Shell. Would probably be reasonable once you have these nodes. You can go Molten Shell, get the reduced extra damage from crits would be probably pretty nice as well. You can also get Duration of Ailments from this, could be good. There's definitely a few masteries out there that are missing that would definitely be nice. 60% crit chance against blinded enemies helps with the rupturing uptime, things like that. Lots of stuff you can get with the next few levels if you want to go even further beyond with this build. As far as gear upgrades, what I would do, you can definitely get Corrupted Risotha's Coil, would definitely be fairly solid. You can get a double dot multi on an amulet, so you can get regular dot multi and fizz dot multi. That'll definitely give you some more damage. The weapon is definitely not amazing. We got tier 3 hybrid, tier 1 flat, and tier 5%. So there's a lot more damage you can get out of this axe if you manage to get the exsanguination suffix as well. But that fire res is very, very nice. So I went ahead and stuck with this one. Anything better than this was going to be well over 10 divines, so I decided just to stick with this. It served my purposes very, very nicely. So yeah, after some awakened gems and things like that, extra levels, I think this build will be a lot stronger, but I decided to not go for it. And that's pretty much where the character has ended up. A little bit of tech I want to go over before I'm done with the build, and that is actually why I even looked at these gloves in the first place. These lines about Crimson Dance with Cat Stealth, it's actually very interesting, and it'll kind of reveal why my weapon swap is a Quill Rain right now. Having conditional Crimson Dance, and if you don't know, Crimson Dance gives you 8 bleeds, but they don't do any extra damage while they're moving, and you do 50% less damage with bleeding. So you get essentially 4 times the bleed damage, but you don't do any extra damage while they're moving. Bleed typically does triple damage while they're moving, so this gives you 4 times. If you have them moving with regular bleed, you get 3 times. So this is generally better. I was really liking Crimson Dance. Flicker Strike with all of the splash was getting me multiple bleeds on targets anyway, and so the clear actually felt just as good with Crimson Dance as it would without it. So I stuck with Crimson Dance. However, if you ran Cat Stealth in this build, and you ran these gloves, what can happen is you can inflict a bleed without Crimson Dance, then get Crimson Dance, and you can actually inflict 8 more bleeds, because the bleeds from Crimson Dance are considered separate from bleeds that are not Crimson Dance. You can have 1 normal bleed, 8 Crimson Dance bleeds, totaling 9 bleeds, or effective 10 times damage. Then, or rather, 5 times damage. 1 normal, and then 8 halves. You get 5 times the bleed damage. Then, what you can do is what most people do with regular bleed without Crimson Dance, is you run an Ensnaring Arrow, which makes a target count as moving. Now, this does nothing for Crimson Dance, which is why you don't see me using it, because I didn't do this. But if you ran this with this glove setup, you could get the 8 Crimson Dance bleeds, which don't care about the moving, then the 1 bleed that does, have the enemy be considered moving with Ensnaring Arrow, triple that 1 bleed's damage, so you've now gone from 4 times your damage with Crimson Dance to 7 times the damage. 4 from Crimson Dance and triple the normal bleed from the moving target without Crimson Dance. So you get around 75% more DPS, assuming all of these things line up. However, that is a lot of things to line up. And with how short my bleeds are in this build, because of the rupturing setup and the faster bleeds from this helmet, all that stuff, this simply was not going to work. Having to weapon swap, using Snaring Arrow, all that stuff, simply not going to work. However, if you were to go for very long bleeds and you weren't going crit, you weren't running rupturing, say you were a champion anyway, and your bleeds were somewhere in the realm of like 8 seconds, 10 seconds, something like that with unbound ailments, something like this could certainly work, and you could get essentially 75% more DPS from compared to Crimson Dance. So that's something to consider. You'd probably run less duration on Cat Stealth, just like if you were running a Ferul's Fur. You could maybe even do it with a Ferul's Fur, and still do the Usurper's Penance setup, Ferul's Fur with Ferul's Pounce, and do something like that. And I think that actually could be fairly interesting. But you would have to invest into fairly long bleeds to make that be consistent. And maybe you even do it as bow bleed just so that you aren't having to weapon swap for ensnaring arrow. But something to consider, it's not the route I went. I don't think it pays off as much and is much clunkier than simply running rupturing with a bit of crit chance, so that's what I went for. But I think there is something here with Ferrule's Pounce. So just a bit of tech for you guys if you want to try something bleed related out. That is a clunky yet I think fairly powerful mechanic to consider. So yeah, that pretty much covers the build. I was happy with it. I had a lot of fun playing it. I played this for a solid 2 weeks, which is actually very long for me. Did a lot of changes over the course of the build, like adding determination, adding the 100% ailment avoidance. Those things came late in the build as I invested more into it, and I am very happy with how it turned out. So that pretty much covers it. I will be doing more builds. I'm not done with PoE yet, I hope. Fingers crossed. I'll admit, definitely on the tail end of the league for me, but I think I've got one more build in me. There's something I'm fairly excited to try out. And quick teaser, it's going to be mana stacking. So, you know, right before GGG Copium buffs mana stacking next league, I'm going to do a mana stacking build and then hate that I did it this league and not next league. But whatever, the gear is cheap this league because no one's running it, so I'm going to give it a go. So I'm excited for that. And that pretty much covers this video. I hope you guys have enjoyed, and throw a subscribe, throw a like if you did. I went ahead and did that whole beginning of the video thing again. I hope you guys have liked that. I intend to keep doing that with all my videos. And yeah, that pretty much covers it. I will see you in the next build.